Good morning, just about everyone from rainy South Manchester. I hope everyone's keeping well. It's great to see so many colleagues here today. My presentation, I think, will be slightly briefer simply because it's at a much more embryonic stage, and I think it provides a good contrast to the other two presentations, which are much further along the road than where Manchester is at. And as Paul alludes to, I can give you some insights into some developments that happened even last night at a meeting I attended with the other vice chancellors of the universities in Greater Manchester. So I'll take a start. This is my university, which I'm missing going to each day at the moment, but this is a much older picture, and it tells something quite interesting about the nature of sustainable travel. You can see electric trams going down Oxford Road. If anybody knows anything about Manchester, they'll know that this road has been pedestrianised once again, and it's only it can only be used for electric buses, but it used to have electric trams down there, and sometimes we think we should have trams down there still today. Maybe we will in the future. So let me take you much further forward to today, and I think I can move the slides on, can't I? Yes. I don't know if I did that or the gremlin did it for me, Jack. But we're on to the next slide, which is we've had social responsibility as a core goal of the university since 2011, and we've had various strategies that have reaffirmed our commitment to social responsibility as one of three goals, alongside the two traditional functions, as I'm sure everybody has in their different strategies today, of research and of education. We made a further commitment to that. I think the third or fourth iteration of this strategy that's maintained our commitment to social responsibility. That's meant that we've had a great deal of stability, and we've been able to progress our various strands of work on this agenda, whether that's around our research impact, whether it's around the nature of our engaged teaching and the impact of our graduates, whether it's our commitment to public engagement, or whether it's our commitment to ensuring that our operations are responsible and are adding value through things like our finances and our human resource management. So we've had this strategy for some time. Our latest iteration is something called Our Future, which keeps social responsibility as one of three core goals in the lilac part of the what we call our onion, our strategy diagram there. But you'll see that civic engagement was one of three themes in the outside. So there's one around global influence, one around innovation, and one around civic engagement. So within Our Future, we made that was a recognition of the role that we were very committed to. We could state a claim to be the first of the civic universities, if you defined it in terms of institutions getting those royal charters in the regions outside of London back in Victorian times. So we've been doing this a long time, but also it was an opportunity to restate this commitment in light of the Civic University Commission and the important role the university was playing in Greater Manchester. So that was our strategy. And when civic universities first came around, they came at a time when we were very focused on developing our internal strategy. So some of the things I'll talk about today are about really how this has evolved since then. So in the course of developing this strategy, we entered into some discussions with Manchester Metropolitan University, which I'll come to in a moment. So that's the broader strategy for Manchester. In terms of social responsibility, I'll just move on to the next slide. There you go. We have four main priorities for social responsibility, and reassuringly and perhaps unsurprisingly, they mirror many of the points that were made in the Nottingham presentation and in the Kiel deals. Actually, our priorities relate to social inclusion in its economic form, in its social form, better health, environmental sustainability, and cultural engagement. And we think about those four big priorities, which also speak very much to the Sustainable Development Goals, as many people will know. We think about the contribution we can make there, both on campus, in terms of the way we operate. So how inclusive are we in terms of our own employment practices, our own equality, diversity, inclusion processes, for example. So we think about our campus, we think about our role in Greater Manchester as well. And then we also think about our role globally. So it has those three dimensions as well. we do a huge amount of work at Manchester, which I don't propose to go through today, in all of these areas, and we've got some things we think are really distinctive to our university, and we think we have a good track record of delivering against those over some time now as an institution ourselves. And I think where the Civic university agenda has really taken us is towards something that will be much more collaborative moving forward, and that's something that's really exciting, and it does mirror many of the things we will have heard in the Nottingham presentation, where they're definitely way further ahead than us. I'd say we're at least a couple of years behind there, but I also think we'll be taking a slightly different approach as well, and I've got as much to gain from any comments that you might give and offers of help and advice than I can give today. But I thought it was a really good chance to talk through some of the live discussions and debates that we're having right now, including up as far as last night, which I'll come to in a moment. So in terms of a civic university agreement, one of the questions Paul has asked all of the presenters today is what you are doing something we can class as a civic university agreement? And I'd say that certainly that's where we're moving towards, more akin to the Nottingham model. And one of the things that we see this as an opportunity to do is to start thinking outside in rather than inside out, and by this, of course, trying to be much more cognizant of the strategic needs and priorities of the region in which we sit, and trying to orientate the goals and the strategies and the priorities of our university more towards those, rather than starting with our own faculties and schools and various acronyms and esoteric university speak, which we tend to traditionally do in higher education. So starting thinking about an analysis of local needs, and I know that was obviously a big recommendation in the original Civic University Commission, was that universities need to be much more aware of the needs of their city regions and the areas in which they operate. And also what you might see is another way of leveling up the impact and influence that we have, and moving from quite specific contributions that we made, much like what we heard from Keele, where we could point to particular agendas across the university where we've got success and a good track record of contributing to the well-being of our city region, whether that's in the case of Manchester contributing to our 2038 zero carbon strategy. Our colleagues at Manchester did all of the maths that allowed us to make that ambitious commitment, or it could be an example of what we've done around contributing to strategies on ageing well in Greater Manchester. So we've got lots of areas where we think we make an interesting contribution, but how can we take the best of those contributions and level that up to something that was more strategic and covered the whole of the capabilities of the university and the needs of the city region, rather than specific ones? So it's a slightly different approach, I guess, to Keele, which was issue-based. We were trying to pull those together into something holistic. Also, the question Paul's asked us as well is, how do we think about place? Certainly Manchester, if you don't know, is also a local authority based within a city region. So Greater Manchester, it has 10 authorities, and we think of it as having a place of 2 cities, but also, interesting language now, we've started to talk much more about towns, and as well as the cities of Manchester and Salford, there are 51 towns, which is a huge amount, and I don't think we talk enough about that in higher education and what the role of universities are in relation to these towns. And if you look at the research on any of the outcomes, whether they're health or economic or social or educational, we know that these are some of the areas where some people have used terms, obviously, such as left behind. And these are areas where I think universities have a particularly important role, and we have plenty of these places in Greater Manchester. It's an incredibly diverse place. So there's around 2.9 million people in Greater Manchester, depending on how you count it, around the margins, and it's got the largest travel to work area of any conurbation in Britain outside of London. So just to give you an idea of scale, as well as those 2.89 million people across Greater Manchester, there's 7 million people live within an hour's drive of the city centre of Manchester. So this is an area that has a huge amount of travel in and out of it on a daily basis. thinking about the objectives of the area, we wanted to ensure that the development of a civic university agreement would map onto the capabilities of universities, and I'll talk conceptually about what we're aiming to do. But really, when we were developing our strategy as our own institutional strategy, we asked ourselves the question, can we achieve more in partnership? Really simple question on this, and to avoid duplication. And that led us to discussions very early on with Manchester Metropolitan University. And I think this is something that we've seen. We were able to look at what the two universities in Nottingham had done by working together. In those two universities in Nottingham, you can probably study anything, research anything that you can think of in higher education. And certainly that's the case if you put the University of Manchester and Manchester Metropolitan Universities together. I think we're the second biggest. I think Manchester Metropolitan are the third or fourth biggest in the UK. So there's a huge amount of study opportunities and a huge amount of research that happens across those institutions. And the campuses, if you know anything about the geography in Manchester, they touch each other. They're literally next door. Our buildings join each other in places. So this seemed an obvious partnership to make with the institutions, and that happened very early on, that there was an agreement between the two vice-chancellors that we would work together to develop a joint civic university agreement. And we've begun that work early in the summer in terms of thinking through the process by which we would do this, although the agreement to work together happened just before the pandemic. The pandemic has led to some interesting outcomes, which I'll come to in a moment, about expanding the scope of what we're doing. But when it was ourselves and Manchester Metropolitan University, we commissioned Public First, who I know worked with the Nottingham universities, and we developed a work plan for this. And I'll talk you through some of the key elements of how we are planning to go about this work. And this is very live. Some of this work has been delayed, I should say, as well. We probably would have completed a lot of this if it wasn't for the pandemic. But that pause has given us an interesting opportunity and hopefully in the end a better outcome. So during 2021, the plan is, first of all, to do a survey of 1,000 residents across Greater Manchester. There are 10 local authorities to get a sample of 100 in each. And that would be designed to understand what the public value most from universities and what they value most about the development of the areas in which they live. If you know anything about the geography of Greater Manchester, it's quite likely to produce some interesting differences in outcomes. So, for example, in Greater Manchester, 3 of the 10 local authorities voted Remain rather than Leave, for example, and 7 authorities voted to leave. You can make some very interesting correlations around experience of higher education and attitudes towards universities, as some of the research from Public First has shown in other pieces of work they've done. And we expect, when we think about Greater Manchester rather than just Manchester, where our university is based, we would get some really interesting differences across our city region. And to be able to be more sensitive to that as a university, we think is a really significant development, because I don't think we've been as good about understanding public sentiment about the universities and what our role might be in a community that might neighbour and buttress our university, as opposed to a university on the fringes of Bolton, for example. I think they'd be quite different what the public might understand about our university and what they would want and hope and expect from us. So first of all, public sentiment, and we'll do that through a survey, and we're very likely to follow that up with some focus groups as well, but understanding quantitatively public sentiment. Then understanding the priorities to enhance the quality of life that exist in the various types of partnerships that the university is traditionally involved in. Things like the LEP and the health partnership being good examples. And also understanding from leaders across Greater Manchester what are the priorities for advancing the quality of life in our areas. And we know that the pandemic has laid a whole range of other factors on top of what were existing priorities, as has been articulated already today, and I don't need to repeat some of those priorities. And then thirdly, the process to think about what our strengths and our existing or future contributions might be and how we might map those as well. And I'm a visual learner, and I think what we're trying to do is hit this area of overlap, I guess, between what the public is saying they want from universities, what our traditional priorities might be, and what the strategic region are. We think that there are likely to be a range of interesting opportunities that the public would want from universities that maybe we won't be best placed to meet, maybe we will. Those public wants for an area might include things that universities, no matter what their specialisms are not the best placed organisations to support. There might be needs of our city region that the university system isn't able to support. For example, it might be something to do with nursery provision, and maybe there's not a university in Greater Manchester that can support that in the way that is needed in our city region. But we think there will be the interesting thing about developing this process will be where there's a healthy overlap between these three facets of work. So let me say a bit about the partnership and what's happened because of the pandemic. The pandemic has really forced the universities to work in a way together in a much more informal and frequent way than has happened previously. There are a range of joint research projects, a range of joint educational provision between ourselves and Manchester Metropolitan University, for example. But not across the piece. We have a shared higher education program, for example. We've now embarked on some shared work around energy innovation, but these will tend to be a bit like what we heard from Keele on a sector basis. So we'll work collaboratively when it suits us on specific agendas. What we want to do, though, is use the opportunity of the pandemic to move towards a way of working together, whether that's in war or in peace, and across a potentially unlimited range of work, and for lots of new opportunities to be on the table, and for those universities to have governance between them to consider what the opportunities are in relation to what the needs of our city region of Greater Manchester is. So during the pandemic, there have been, on average, weekly meetings, and they tend to happen on Monday evenings at 6 o'clock. So we're on Tuesday now, so I was at that meeting last night. And on Monday evenings, the Vice-Chancellors have been getting together. Like most universities, we've had to work out what was happening when students returned to Manchester. Unless you've had your head buried, you'll see we've had some particular challenges in Manchester. Manchester Metropolitan University started earlier than many other universities, so had some of the earliest spikes. We had some particular challenges at our university, but lots of that have been shared challenges that we've had across the city. And the universities are not separate, of course, to our city regions. They buttress communities, and the public health needs of Manchester and of Greater Manchester are coterminous with the public health needs that we had for our own students. So the Vice-Chancellors have been working very closely together to plan how we would handle the test and trace system, how we would handle issues of isolation, how we would handle issues of student mental health, how we would handle the interrelationship of measuring our case rates and sharing that information, setting up testing sites on campus, right through to now, where we've been undertaking tens of thousands of tests across the universities in Greater Manchester. So that's something that has involved a range of collaborative working that we've not seen previously. Because of that collaborative working, myself and my counterpart at Manchester Metropolitan University were observing our universities working more closely, and we felt that we were already paused on some of the development of this work between the two institutions because of the pandemic. But we thought, can we use this as an opportunity to invite the other institutions to see if they would wish to join in something that will ultimately take longer, but also ultimately, I hope, have more impact. And as of last night, Salford and the Royal Northern College of Music, so that's 4 of the 5 Greater Manchester institutions, have agreed to do this, which is really pleasing. So that's hot off the press. And we're just waiting on a response from Bolton University, who will be the 5th institution. And we expect Bolton will be interested, of course, as well. So we think, I don't know if this is the case, I'd be keen if in the chat, if somebody else could tell me whether there is an example of a city regional university agreement, civic university agreement. And if there is, I'm really keen to hear from other people, because we'll be embarking on this work next year. For me, the pandemic, therefore, has led us to pause, but in that pause has allowed us to take up a new opportunity to capitalize on the more collaborative forms of working that we've witnessed during the pandemic. And we hope that using this approach of surveying the public, working closely with our leaders, mapping out the different capabilities and priorities we have within the university, that we'll be able to address some of the really big and significant challenges Greater is going to have over the next 5 to 10 years. We know that economic recovery within Greater Manchester is going to be hugely important. We already knew that there was an area of extreme inequalities, where challenges around productivity and inclusive growth are real features within the Greater Manchester economy. And we think we've got an important role to play. So within our university, we've got the biggest ever ESRC grant at the moment to create a productivity institute, which will create regional productivity forums in each part of the UK, including in Greater Manchester. We're working with Professor Kate Pickett, who's going to be chairing an inequalities commission for Greater Manchester. Manchester Metropolitan University have the leading institute looking at the role of the high street and revising government on towns and high streets, which is going to be really important in our city region, but of course right across the UK. So we have challenges around the environment and how we build back greener. And we have zero carbon targets within Greater Manchester, as many parts of the country do. And of course, the healthcare challenges have been those points have been well made in previous presentations. We also have a lot to contribute in terms of culture. The universities as a system own important cultural assets in Greater Manchester, which are loved and enjoyed by the public, but also importantly are there to address some of the big social and environmental challenges we face, whether that's aging well, whether that's healthcare, whether that's ecological thinking or intercultural understanding. So we probably, we think we have a fair idea of our capabilities as a set of institutions, but how can we match these and talk about this in a way that is much, much more orientated to what the public think and value about universities? If we can get that right, I think that will also have a lot of other added benefits for the role of our universities within Greater Manchester. And just finally then to say that in terms of light bulb moments, I think I've covered it really. By having this opportunity, this incredible period we've all lived through, where we've had to pause many projects like this, it's given us an opportunity to build a wider coalition and a wider set of relationships. So we really want to ensure that the remainder of this pandemic, however long that might be, can help us build some of those partnerships with people across different universities that previously haven't worked together. So that's a really positive thing to come out of this, that we'll be able to build some of those relationships and trust and knowledge of our brother and sister organisations across Greater Manchester. Finally, just to say, Paul, that yeah, I'm really keen to get feedback on this city regional element then, if people can do that, and thank you very much.